Okay, hi class. This is Chelsea Robinson again. I actually had some technical difficulties with my iPhone, so I had to start another video. I'm going to start exactly where I stopped my last video at. Basically, what I wanted to discuss was how some of these parents wanted to escape the anti-Mexican attitudes of some of the people in the United States during this time. They chose to send their students to Catholic schools or private schools just for the fact that there they would be able to control that their child was speaking Spanish and English. They were interested in their child receiving a bilingual education, and they actually wanted their child to still be able to learn how to speak English, but they wanted emphasis to be put on their culture, their Spanish cultures, and Spanish as a language as well. So education has been used as a form of social control in many instances. If you're denying the population the knowledge it needs to protect its political and economic rights and to economically advance in society and grow, that's what you would consider segregation. During this time, specifically with the Mexican Americans, they faced farmers having this belief that if they remained uneducated, they would be inexpensive labor. And basically, they used the notion that if they didn't know any better, then they could continue to use them the way they were using them in their fields. So this was a very unfair treatment during this time. Okay, another very big issue was the non-enforcement of compulsory education law. Basically what that is attendance. A survey of one Texas county in 1921 found that only about 30.7% rather of Mexican school-age children were actually in school. In another county in the actual 1920s in Texas, quoted that school authorities admitted that they actually enforced the school attendance for the Anglo children, but not on Mexican children. Some families simply did not send their children, but they would not go to them like they would a white child. And it did state in our text that a very important reason that some did not send their children to school was because they needed their child to work as a basis of actually surviving money-wise. I do know this to be a fact because I've witnessed it myself in my own class. My child, one of my students having to work on the weekends as a way of her family surviving. But it is pitiful that during that time they did not enforce that the child had to be in school. Okay, so segregation. Gilbert Gonzalez basically displayed in our text what the typical attitude was in the Southwest during the 1930s. And he quoted that 85% of the districts investigated in the Southwest were actually still segregated. Pressure from white citizens was usually the cause for this segregation. This happened not just in the Southwest, but all over the United States. So, I would like to now discuss some ways that things changed. Segregation continued until Mexican Americans began winning a series of important legal cases. They decided to take some of their things to court, and they were very successful in this. In 1945, they wanted to grant requests for transfers out of segregated Mexican schools. This was the Mendez versus Winchester School District of Orange County case. And there was another case again in 1948, the LULAC, which basically stands for the League of United Latin American Citizens, and it's an equivalent of the NAACP. And what they wanted to do was sue an independent school district because they were segregating based on Mexican descent. They were simply discriminating against their children because they were of Mexican descent. Both of these cases were successful. Both of these cases won. And this final ruling actually required that the local school district end all forms of segregation. Now, although they were victorious in their cases, some schools and their districts still manipulated the district lines. They would find out where the majority of Mexican Americans were living in their community, and they would draw up lines based on that so that they could still manipulate and segregate school districts. They also gave choice plans to students to keep segregation alive. Two important quotes from our text was that in 1966, the California State Department of Education reported that 57% of Spanish children were attending schools that were predominantly Mexican Americans. So again, very segregated. And then in 1973, civil rights activist John Cawley estimated that 2/3 of the Mexican American children in Los Angeles attended segregated schools. So a lot of segregation still going on. So in conclusion about Mexican American education, they have struggled through many, many years, and I still feel like a lot of their demands have not really been met. They still face a lack of bilingual teachers in our communities. There is still a decrease in the number of Latino students going to college, and they face a higher dropout rate than other economic groups. Okay, so my next subgroup is Asian Americans, and the Naturalization Act of 1790 was for free white persons only. So this meant that the Asian Americans were not able to obtain citizenship through this act. It was resolved in 1952 when the requirements were changed for this law, and it stated that it no longer was limited to only whites. Asian Americans, though, still struggled for equal rights, non-segregation, and even today for equal admission into colleges. The next subgroup that I would like to discuss is Native American students and U.S. schools. Native Americans struggled to be unsegregated. And trying to find my next note here. Boarding schools. In our text, it describes the boarding schools which have terrible accommodations. The reasons for these boarding schools, they believe that if they took these students, very, very young students at a very young age, away from their homes, away from their cultural influences in the home, that they could mold them into being something different. And so they did not want them to be a part of their culture. The boarding schools that they took these children to were in terrible conditions. They were not fed properly. Basically, they were mistreated because they were Native Americans. All of this changed, however, after the election of John F. Kennedy in 1960. And in 1972, the Indian Education Act was passed, and that provided assistance to local schools so they could develop these programs and meet special educational needs of the Native American students. Okay, next I want to discuss the educational experiences of immigrants in the United States. And one thing in our textbook that really stood out to me was the educational attainment based on if you were foreign-born Americans or a native-born American. And this is on their high school graduation rate. And basically, if you were foreign-born, you were 40% of those students went overall in this survey and graduated high school. 60% of native-born Americans graduated high school. But to me, it was very surprising because the college attainment and of a bachelor degree or more was completely equal for both native and foreign-born Americans. So the colleges did a much better job of educational fairness. Okay, so the quality of education improving. Many immigrants that move to the U.S. are a lot more prepared than what traditionally they have been in the past. Quality of education in many countries has been improving. So once they do move here, it's easier for them to transition into into our schools. I know that if you have a student to move in from another country and they are significantly behind where they should be for their age, it is a very hard transition versus if they are prepared in the same manner that we're preparing our students here in the United States. Poverty also plays a large part into students and if they're academically where they should be. The United States, if they were to work on the poverty of Central America, I believe they would see a very positive effect on our educational system as well. The primary task of the school is for the teacher to teach in standard English, but we must provide help to students who have limited use of English. That is the only fair way for us to give an equal education to all students. Okay, languages of school-aged children. The ELL, which is English Language Learners, according to the text, do worse on standardized tests when in poor performing schools based on if they were in higher performing schools. For the most part, a lot of your ELL population will be in the lower performing school districts. It will be in the higher poverty areas, and it will also be in a lot of your title schools. I know my actual school does not have a very large diverse population, but we do have a large ELL Spanish speaking group in our school, but we are considered a title school, and I feel like we are not able to benefit from helping these students as much as a higher performing and higher economic status school would be. Are we prepared for language diversity? There is a severe shortage of teachers in America and that are actually able to teach students who have limited English proficiency. It's essential that we are able to help these children learn the English language, and their success really depends on if they are able to increase their knowledge of the English language. I took a look at 2 other sources, and one of those was the Civil Rights Project on the UCLA website. And what I found was that a percentage of teachers with higher levels of training in the diverse cultures actually teach in schools with fewer white students. And then many of the teachers surveyed said that if they would have had more training, they would be more likely to teach in schools that were actually diverse. I know, of course, speaking again from my school, when working with English language learners, I feel that we need more training than typically we would if we were in a undiverse school. In order for us to work with these students who are ELL, we need to have actual training on that. Also, in my second text that I looked at was the Center for American Progress, and it says, unfortunately, the rapid growth in the ELL population has not been matched by significant growth in teacher understanding of how to best educate these students. In order for us to really be prosperous, we're going to need to increase the amount of teachers being prepared to help these learners to actually reach their full potential in our classrooms. If we are not matching the growth of these students, then we will continue to fall behind in our progress with these students. And this would be my works cited. I hope you have learned a little bit about students' diversity during my presentation. I hope that I have really pulled out the most important parts of our chapter. I feel like regardless if we are a teacher, an administrator, or just someone furthering our degree, we can all benefit from really understanding diversity in our school systems and finding ways that we can continue our education and continue our training to better help these children. If we bridge the gap between English language learners and predominantly English-speaking children, I think we'll see tremendous growth in our school systems across the nation. And I hope you've learned something through my presentation. Thank you.